lives, over 80% of whom were women, according to the Daily Star, the Bangladesh newspaper. And then over another 2,000 were injured, some very badly. Now that disaster came shortly after two other disasters, which in their own right would have brought us here today, I hope. In September 2012, the Ali Enterprise fire in Pakistan, in which over 250 people lost their lives, and a month later, the Tazreen factory fire in Bangladesh, which killed 117 people. Now, these are criminal actions, criminal negligence, but also clearly systemic challenges. And the real focus of today is to look at what we've learned over the past 10 years in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, but also more globally across Asia and also here. We will talk about the Accord on Fire and Building Safety and the Ready-Made Garment Sustainability Council that's replaced it in Bangladesh, and also the International Accord and the Bangladesh Accord, which has been established. We're also going to touch on European issues. Globally in 2011, as many of you will know, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights were agreed by consensus vote at the Human Rights Council. And many people would point to the Accord as an example of rigorous human rights due diligence in practice. Albeit focused on the issue of fire and safety, it is held up as a model of what good can look like all around the world. And in Germany now we have the German Supply Chain Act, and of course we are looking forward to the European Union's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. All of these things are coming together, and all of these things will be discussed this morning, as will other outstanding issues like living wages, gender equality, and the long-standing issue of gender-based violence in the workplace. And I'm very pleased that the Dindigul Agreement is represented here today. Now, I would like then to hand to a recorded message by Svenja Schulz, who's the German Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, and she will formally welcome us to the event.
Shibi Rani comes from a poor family. She started work at the age of 12, making clothing. The family depended on her wage. Then came the day that was to change everything. On the 24th of April 2013, the Rana Plaza textile factory collapsed. It took just 90 seconds. Almost 1,000 people died, most of them women. Shibi was one of the 2,400 people who were injured but survived. It took 3 days until she was freed. She ended up losing her left arm as a result of her injuries. That was 10 years ago. Back then, Rana Plaza symbolized what was wrong in the international garment industry: exploitation, starvation wages, little protection in the workplace, and a lack of transparency in supply chains. Today, Rana Plaza is also a sign of positive change, a sign that it is possible to learn the right lesson from a disaster like this. What has happened in those 10 years? The German government has pushed for major changes in the global textile industry. So have our partner countries. And as a result, factories look much better now in many parts of Asia than they did back then. Great progress has been made in Bangladesh, especially where fire and building safety has improved. The German government and its partner countries have also focused on more general improvements. We have teamed up with the International Labour Organization in Bangladesh to push for more social and financial security for workers. One example of these efforts: last year, Bangladesh introduced its first ever insurance scheme for work-related accidents. Another big step forward has been Germany's supply chain law. Businesses now have to ensure that human rights are being observed. But to achieve decent work conditions and protect the environment worldwide, we need to go even further. For example, with a law at European level, like the one being debated at the moment in Brussels. Through its development cooperation, Germany has also done a lot to support the victims of the accident in Rana Plaza. Many of them lost arms or legs and had to find alternative work. Since 2013, the Inclusive Job Center has provided retraining for almost 2,000 of the workers affected. And that brings us back to Shilpi Rani, the girl from the textile factory. Following the accident, she got money to help pay for the operations and medical treatment she needed. A teacher came to her bedside and gave her lessons. And now she's working for an aid organization, MENA, and is studying law. Her ambition is to become a judge and help to achieve more justice. Let's keep fighting together for decent working conditions all across the world.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now I'd like to invite the panelists for our first panel to come and join me on stage. Rana Hook, Christina Clausen, and Tobias Becker, please. Right, this first panel will look very much at what's been achieved and not achieved in the past 10 years in the field of occupational health and safety, specifically, I think, in Bangladesh and Pakistan. I hope it's going to be interactive. Please feel free to respond directly to anything each of you say. It makes it more interesting as well. And Rana, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Rana Hook, you're part of the board of directors. You're the industry representative now at the RMG Sustainability Council. But if we think back to 2013, you were then, I think, part of the BG.
No, I wasn't.
You wasn't, okay. Maybe you should say what you were doing then.
I was the president in 2019.
Okay, okay. But cast your mind back to the disaster. What kind of impact did it have in the country?
Thank you very much for having me here. To start with 2013, 24th April, I vividly remember the morning, actually, when the news broke. And by the afternoon, my husband and I were both there at the site. There was stench of corpse. It was a disaster. It is a tragedy that resulted in a collective national tragedy, and our heads hang in shame. And it's true that whatever had happened, true that we did not have any idea about structural integrity of buildings, true we did not have any idea about any regulatory guidance from everywhere, but happy that, in about 7 years, we did remediate. And then, of course, because of international accord and alliance for the North American brands, and because of their intervention, we were kind of pushed to remediate. But I will just say one thing and then stop, perhaps, and that is, while we learned a lot at the cost of a great tragedy, much yet needs to be done, and the pledge should continue.
If you to think about the things that worked over the past 10 years, Bangladesh has developed economically, right? People now talk in a few years' time, Bangladesh might become a medium-income country. Have standards been part of that story?
Standards definitely have been a part of that story, because we are probably the safest in the world right now. With the structural, electrical, and fire integrity that is being applied in the factories, we are definitely compliant. With the LDC graduation, if you link us, there are many other things that need to be told. And it is a challenge for us, because there's a lot of clauses which will kind of also put us at a disadvantage. We could actually tackle it all better if we had better prices. So that is a key component of what should go right from now on and how all of us should be part of it.
Better prices from the brands.
Better prices from the brands, at the same time, better and more structured stand from the union side, and also from the industry, more willingness to evolve. I think instead of pointing fingers, I think the blame game, that phase is over. It's all of us, it's on all of us to literally work together. Otherwise, we won't actually end up going towards the shared goal.
So that's one of the things that hasn't worked, in your view, is the lack of incentives.
I would absolutely say this. I don't think we are paid enough. I mean, there was a very clear report a couple of months ago from a WTO UN organization, and that said that Bangladesh is literally paid 23% to 83% less prices than 10 of our competitors, especially in men's trousers, in jeans jacket, in jeans tops and bottoms. So, that's a clear indication of how low we are paid.
And for those of us who don't know much about the RMG Sustainability Council, how's it different from the Accord? Why did the Accord finish, and why did the new thing start?
Happy to share that I did initiate RSC, but all of us together, what we thought was 7 years down the line, there had to be an insertion of a national discourse. Because in international accord, there was only brands and unions. But this is the first time probably in the world where brands, unions, and industry are all in it together. We all thought together that perhaps if the industry came on board and if we understood each other's position, it would be better to reach a consensus. And as it stands now, RSC has 18 members, 6 from union, 6 from industry, and 6 from the brands. So it is an equal distribution, and at the same time, nothing is decided on majority. It's all based on consensus. And Christina, who's sitting next to me, is also part of it, and Jochen also is here somewhere, yeah. So
Christine, I'll come to you in a minute to get a union perspective on these changes. But we've got Mr. Khan from Pakistan, Mr. Abid Ali Khan. You're technical director at Faisal Spinning Mills. I don't know if you can hear me, sir.
Yes, I can.
I believe you've got a picture to share with us. I mentioned the Ali Enterprise disaster at the beginning.
Yes.
What have been the lessons learned in Pakistan following that horrendous factory fire?
Thank you for having me here.
To
be very honest, if we are talking about these two incidents, like Ali Enterprises and Rana Plaza, both are entirely different. If we are talking about the Ali Enterprises, it's totally fire incident and very severe fire incident. After that, immediately, this is very unfortunate that everyone observing that there is a human body is burning inside the factory, and they have their major problem is this: they didn't have any evacuation plan in this factory. So they have some conventional doors during the emergency. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. I can't see you though. I don't know. Are you on the? You are there. Okay. We just can't see you on the panel. I think everybody else can see you fine. So keep going. Sorry.
So first of all, what we can do in our factories as industry, part of the industry. So we revisit all our systems, our electrical equipments, and our evacuation plans and the layout, how we evacuate our HRs. So at that time, we observed that in Ali Enterprises, there is no evacuation plan as per their number of people they are working inside the factory. So when we conduct a risk assessment of our factory, so we observed that on each emergency door, there is a 60 to 70 people, they are catered one emergency door like this. So we reorganize our all evacuation plans, and we induct some more emergency doors, fire exit door. Like now, right now we have only 30 people, 30 workers on one door. And we design our all evacuation like within 60 seconds on each floor, our 350 employee we can evacuate with this new and this updated version of the evacuation plan. So these kind of different changes we adopt, and immediately these are some corrective measures that we install some fire resistance emergency exits. Previously, the normally factory have the conventional doors. Right now, we have a bus bar electrical system with the evacuation doors. We have a fire alarm system, and we put maximum 60-second all the system to evacuate the people from the factory. You know, the man behind the gun is more important than the gun. On this slogan, now our most top priority is this: how we survive and how we save the people in case of any emergency. For that, then I will share my some pictures that we adopted after this incident.
Yes, please do show the pictures.
Please.
Yeah, there we go.
See.
We can see those
right.
fine. Yeah.
Yes, the right side of the picture, you see there is some emergency exits.
Right.
So on the fourth side of our building, we construct these 10 emergency exits on each floor with the same structure you can see. Then on the very top left, you can see we replace all our conventional electrical wire with the busway system. So right now we have a 100% busway system in our factory during our operational activity. There is no conventional wire. With this electrical busway system, we save 0% of our energy losses during the operation, and we secure 0% risk of the short circuit. And then you see the top right side, there is the evacuation plan, and there is a space we provide to the employee. There is a very wide space in our production hall. Like you see the door, fire alarm doors with the bus bar and with the heat resistance system. And also you see on the top bottom right side, there is an environment which we provide to our workers after this incident. And we are very focused to the construction side also if we are talking about the Rana Plaza incident. So we observed there is a 3 to 4 major point that this is the cause of the Rana Plaza incident, like the building strength, building load bearing capacity, their foundation, and the life of the building. So after that, we must cater that when we construct the new building, so these 4 to 5 points we must cater during the construction, like the foundation, like the steel structures, height of the building, and also ventilation and the comfort environment and comfort zone in the production hall. So these kind of different measures we are taking to avoid these kind of incident in future. And after that, the government of Pakistan also very willingly participate in these all activities and revise our building code of Pakistan first fire safety provision in 2016. So in that we cater each and everything in this code of building to avoid any incident, these kind of incident in future during the production. So these are some different measures we are taking after these incidents.
Thank you. What does the international accord mean in Pakistan? I mean, you've said that the context is different around the factory fire and the building collapse in Bangladesh. So accepting that the context is different, you have adopted an accord that started in Bangladesh and is now being applied to Pakistan. What does that give you?
Actually, if you are talking about the accord standard, so only industry can't do this. For this, the accord authority must be coordinate with the government of Pakistan, because the government of Pakistan have their own standards. As I already told you that they update their version like Building Code of Pakistan Fire Safety Provision in 2016. Right. After the Ali Enterprises and Rana Plaza incident, the first revision in 2014 and then the updated revision we got in 2016. So I think only if we are talking about only industry, private sector can achieve all these standards like the accord. so it's very difficult. So it must be as a joint venture with the government of Pakistan, with the private sector, with the industries of Pakistan. So I think we are always willingly approve any changes, and you know there is always room for the improvement in anywhere. So I think if right now we check, we make the gap analysis and we check our building and our, I am talking about like the facial spinning, our production halls, our construction infrastructure, each and everything. So I think we are compliant 90% plus as per the accord standard, because we have a fully automatic electrical system. We have no conventional wire in our factories. We have a specific height of the building. So we have expansion joint in our building. So we also cater the pillar to pillar, the distance, and the beam and column, steel structure, and there is, there is a building contraction margin we must have. During a different weather, the building contract. So now we are catering all these things after this incident of the Rana Plaza.
Right.
And the government pre-decide the height of the building. So if we have a 65 feet height permission from the government, so we have a specific standard from the government of Pakistan that these kind of infrastructure, these kind of the steel structure we have in the foundation, then we have a column, then we have a beam, then we have a roof. So right now everyone avoids to the open wiring, electrical wiring in the factories. They have maximum, they are place their conventional wiring with the busway system, which is very expensive, but not more than the life of any worker.
Right.
So in our factory, we have a 0% conventional wire. So we have a 22 feet height. Then we have a 10 emergency doors in the one floor where we have a 350 employees on the each floor, and we have a 10 emergency exit. So it's mean right now 30 people we cater from the one door, and we design all these doors like this that everyone have 30 seconds to reach their emergency exit. So with this new arrangement, we are able to evacuate all these people within 60 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. We might come back to you during the discussion, but I want to turn to... Thank you. Christina Clausen, you're on the board of directors, you're the trade union representative on the RSC, but you're also on the steering committee of the International Accord. Yes. I got that right?
Yes.
So from your perspective, both Bangladesh and Pakistan, what have we got right the past 10 years, and what have we still got to get right?
I think one of the most important things that has come from this horrific, we would say, industrial homicide of Rana Plaza is that it really showed that voluntary, corporate-led audits are not, they don't work. We've known that. It's the dirty secret of the industry. And here we were able to build a new model that had legally binding commitments on the brands, but also where there was remediation financial support for the industry. I think that's, we talk about prices, we talk about brands' responsibility, and here was a way that you had an agreement that was negotiated between global trade unions, national trade unions, and global brands for really, a really strong way to be transparent, to have financing, to have joint governance. And I think when we look over the time period that we work together, having national manufacturers as part of the governance structure is key. I think that's been a really important evolution that we've done together throughout the remediation. But I think also it's very important to note that workers now have a complaints mechanism, right? So if there's issues in the factory, if you look back to Rana Plaza, managers told workers to get back into the building after they said they saw cracks. If you don't get back, you won't get a month's pay. Now on, poverty wages, that's a choice workers made at that time, and it was a deadly choice. So I think that that's really the right to refuse work, the right to say, I'm not entering in this building, or these fire exits, these are blocking, to have that complaints mechanism as part of the agreement and have an independent way to resolve them has been quite it's key. It's key for workers to feel the power, to have the freedom of association, to organize around health and safety issues. So I would say that's one very important lesson learned. And I think there's also other things that have changed. I mean, transparency. When you think about it, this sector is one of the most transparent sectors in the supply chain. Brands have to list their factories. The sky didn't fall in when they had to do that. Manufacturers are able to be part of programs with transparency to know how if you're 95% remediated. That's important, right? Those are important transparency indicators, I would say. And then finally, I think one thing that's very important is when we look at the international accord, the goal is to expand to other countries, right? That's the agreement that we have with the brands. And I think it's important that, we have Bangladesh, we have Pakistan, we look forward to the MENA region. Today I'm joined in this conference with a delegation of trade union leaders from MENA, from Myanmar, from Cambodia, and Bangladesh, all desiring and pushing global brands and governments to support the expansion of this agreement. This is a strong agreement. It's one of the, everyone calls it a way to change supply chain. I think it's the new model. The old model of corporate social responsibility, voluntary initiatives, that's the way of the past. We need to have legally binding agreements that are sustainable and that put workers, industry, and global brands together. And I like the comment that you made, Rubana, that this is a shared responsibility. But it's a shared responsibility that each party comes with its roles and responsibilities, but we also need a legal framework because we cannot go back to just having voluntary. So I think it's a way that we hold the brands accountable. We have many similar interests in the supply chain, right? We want better pricing. We know that better pricing and better purchasing practices, comes to the worker's pocket, but we want a legal way that it comes to the worker's pocket. We want industry collective bargaining. These are all key issues when we look at decent work in the global supply chain. That's our next step. We need legal frameworks to be able to hold all the parties accountable. Let me leave there.
Yeah, no, I want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions, if that's okay, so keep hold of your microphone. This issue of legal liability, legal accountability, in a way, the Accord preceded mandatory due diligence legislation that's now just coming in Europe, but the Accord was well ahead of that. What are the brands signing up to in terms of legal accountability? What does that look like in practice? And with the RSC now, do the manufacturers too have the same level of legal liability as the brands?
Well, so I would think it's good to think of it this way. If you look at the international accord, you should think of this as the framework. In this agreement, the global unions hold the global brands accountable for several things. One, they hold them accountable for working with their suppliers to remediate, right? So that includes financial feasibility. If you're unable to remediate, the agreement says that brands shall ensure that it's financially possible. It's also holding the brands to account that they remediate the complaints that come in. So if a complaint comes in, we have a whole complaints mechanism and different steps. So it holds them accountable for that. It holds them accountable to financially support the program. I mean, if you think about it, we have in Bangladesh over 200 engineers who are independent inspectors. I think that's also the key thing here, is that it's not, these are independent inspectors that are hired by both the trade unions, the brands, and the industry to implement and ensure that remediation takes place. And so then if you think about what happens, say, a brand does not do any of these
Right,
things.
yeah. What are the
Then,
consequences?
yeah, then we have a whole dispute resolution mechanism
Okay.
internally. And the last step in that mechanism, if we're unable to reach an agreement, right, there's a whole procedure. If we're unable to reach agreement, we can take the case to The Hague, the International Court of Arbitration. They would make a ruling, and then that ruling would be able to be legally implemented in the country of origin.
Has that happened in the history of the accord?
Yes, we have 2 cases that had gone through that, but we settled before we had to have an arbitrator's ruling. So I think that is the essence of collective bargaining. I mean, when you think about it, legally binding, that's what every trade union and every company who sits down on a factory level, on a sectoral level, that is what we get at the end. We get a legally binding agreement. So it's not anything that's, new, but what is new that it's in the supply chain.
Right.
And it pulls together the leverage of the brands, their financial leverage as well, because each individual brand wouldn't be able to remediate, work with their suppliers to remediate. This is a collective pooling of that.
Can I hand just to Rabana briefly? Are your members signing up to this same thing then with the RSC, this same legal compliance?
No, it's not legally binding, but the members of Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association are automatically, signed up for the RSC.
Right.
I just wanted to quickly make a few comments,
Sure.
if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
One, while Christina does mention that brands did support remediation financially, the very few brands who did, and Bangladesh spent, but International Accord at least made provision for that. That's to be commended. Bangladesh spent $1.5 billion importing just fire equipments, and private sector did, not the government. This is one. Number two, while you have legally binding agreement, this has also kept the North American brands, away from signing. Right. And this is a sad part, because they haven't joined.
They still have the alliance.
Yes, they still have the alliance, so that's sad. That's
we'll
two.
come back to you.
No, but
Let Rabana stop.
No. I am in favor of the legally binding agreement.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is North American brands have just not joined.
Okay.
Number three, this legally binding agreement, it's great, and compliance is great, but that does not seal the deal. What seals the deal are basically self-awareness and empathy from all the stakeholders. Unless you do that, you really won't go anywhere. So that was my point. And Christina, all in favor of legally binding agreement.
No,
Christina,
I agree with you that and I apologize for not saying the amount of money that the manufacturers spent to remediate, that you cannot not say that. But the parameters on which it happened was based on the agreement. And it was based on your commercial relationship with the brands, right? The brands are asking that if they want to place orders and they want to have production in your country, there were standards. It's a high standard. We want a world-class standard for workers in the industry, right? So I think, and you know what? I think for the North American brands who didn't sign, it shows something. They're free riding on the good intentions of the brands who have signed this agreement. They are saying to their factory that they have to source an RSC covered factories, and they're not paying. That's not the way it should be. And that's why mandatory due diligence that's coming into effect now already in Germany, but also in the European directive, this is to create a level playing field. I mean, and that's, I think we could have done it without a mandatory legal framework, but that's where we are right now. And if we want to have decent work in the supply chain, we need we need the legal framework, a mandatory legal framework now.
Thank you for this. Is really helpful. I hope everyone agrees. It sort of helps clarify when we have these constructive discussions. But I wanted this issue of remedy. And Christina, you mentioned that one of the travesties of Rana Plaza was that the workers had left, many of the workers had left the building and were told to go back inside, right? The cracks were appearing, And it was the lack of feeling safe or feeling the ability that they could refuse the command to go back in. So it's an issue of freedom of expression, of the right to organize, etc. Are these things occupational health and safety, or do these things sit outside of the remedy system? And what then happens to those kind of issues if they sit outside of?
No, they don't sit outside. Under the agreement, workers can file immediately in a complaint with the Accord or RSC staff to indicate if a building is not safe, and that it will immediately rise to then the inspection. The government, DIFE, will be contacted. It's not the RSC Accord's purview to close buildings, right? We all know that's a government function.
But what if the concern isn't building related? For example, we know with remedy systems that often when you put complaints mechanisms in place, workers will come forward with a whole host of different issues. So what if it's about the abusive relationship they have with their employer, or any other issue in the workplace?
Yes, so,
what happens to those issues?
So any complaint is taken in.
Okay.
It's investigated and determined if it's OSH or if it's non-OSH.
Okay.
If it's OSH, it's then further investigated. And when we say occupational health and safety, it's not only building and fire safety, it's excessive working hours, it's maternity benefits, it's heat, excessive heat. So you can those are all investigated. Brands and employers are notified of these. The non-OSH ones are then sent to the brands with the manufacturer and copy, and then tried to be, but they cannot be handled under the agreement, because the agreement, we would like to expand that, of course, but the agreement says that it will cover occupational health and safety.
That's really helpful.
Yes.
Okay, Tobias. So you've been very patient. Good morning to you. Country Director for Pakistan for GIZ. Sir, I'd really like to know from a government perspective what the German development cooperation view of what we've heard is, and the lessons of the past 10 years, and why you think it's important for European governments to be behind these initiatives.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's actually a big question. German Development Corporation worked in occupational health and safety, of course, also already before Rana Plaza and this tragedy happened. But you can see it took another dimension after that. And we work in different countries. We work in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Vietnam, India, and Cambodia. And I think it's important to mention, because it's also about to bring these countries together in discussions in that topic, to avoid actually the race to the bottom on this. I came to Bangladesh roughly 9 months after the Rana Plaza happened, and I stayed there for 4 years. And I always say, being an optimist by profession, I really see that over that time, there has been a change, and there is a path towards more compliant, safer workplaces and better standards is set. And I think this today's meeting and the participation and the discussion we have heard so far is an indication on that. I think it also showed that it's always two-sided. Textile industry is, of course, for Pakistan and for Bangladesh, a very important sector for the government and for the whole country. But it's also for Germany. I mean, we import 16% of Bangladesh exports just to Germany and 8% of Pakistan. And therefore also German Development Corporation and its policy and instruments have taken the responsibilities they have. Now, we talked about self-awareness, we talked about empathy, and we talked about that we have to tackle this issue together. Just give me 1 or 2 examples to show. We have worked in German Development Corporation in Bangladesh with around 1,100 factories, reaching out to 1.4 million workers. And we, of course, work always with the government side, so we work with labor inspectors. Just a very small examples. If you want to be independent, you need your own means of transportation, for example. If you have to rely on that, you are invited by the factory to come there. Of course, it's different. So with this little means, but also establishing working in the factories, very often it's not only about building fire doors or investing, it's about awareness. If you have exits and they are blocked, we have seen incidents also where fire break out, where just their exits were locked out of unawareness what can happen. So these are all things we have worked in the past. And looking at the accord, I'm really happy that it's now also rolled out to Pakistan, because what I really see what happened in Bangladesh is that it was really broken down on company level. So each company was assessed, and the needs of improvement were identified. The measures were then implemented, and there was a follow-up mechanism on this. And with the two associations, they have now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2,300 factories which have been looked after. But we should not forget that not all textile factories are part of the industrial associations. And we still have the issue of subcontracting. We have informal factories where all of these standards do not play the role it should be.
So what happens to those factories? I mean, those that aren't exporting to Germany, perhaps they're more for the internal market, or they're exporting to other countries. What's your leverage for those elements of the supply chain?
Well, I think if you look now also in the legislation with the supply chain law, suppliers and manufacturers have to look more closely into whom they are working with.
Yeah.
And we have to see how this is trickling down. I think we also have to be aware of that in the sectors there has to be a transformation. Maybe it's more useful to have larger corporations which employ then there and have a different kind of purchasing and production power than if you do this way in the informal sector. So this will all play a role into this. And of course also the government has to play a role. I mean, it's very exciting to see that after 2015, where we started together with the ILO on occupational accident insurance, that Bangladesh last year has now an employment injury scheme established, which helps on this. Again, but it's only for the formal sector. So it's of course also on the governments to bring mainly all factories into the formal sector and do not tolerate the informal sector.
And the relationship between economic development in a country like Bangladesh and these standards, I mean, obviously there are other sectors of the economy, shipbreaking, brick making, etc., that don't have similar initiatives to the one that we see in the apparel sector. Is there really, in your belief, some evidence that these standards do drive economic development for the country?
I think so. I mean, if you look in Pakistan, we work in Pakistan with the textile industry since 2014. We have worked now with around 150 companies and over 250,000 workers have really improved working conditions, improved occupational health and safety, and more formalized employment. What I see there is really relevant is we all have to talk about this push and pull factors. Yeah. So of course you need push factors, which is about, for example, legislation, where the government has to play a role, where the buyers might also play a role in this. But in particular in Pakistan, we could very much see the relationship between decent work, safety, safe workplace, productivity, and competitiveness. And we have clearly demonstrated in over 30 companies, if you put this together, you perform better. Now you could see that these companies also during the COVID crisis were much more resilient than companies who have not this kind of mindset. And I cannot stress this again. Yes, it's about investment, safety doors and whatever you need, but it's mainly about your mindset and the mindset of factory owners, for example, to know how to really drive a sustainable business, because sustainable business drives off. And in these 30 factories, they grew their business and they have created 5,000 additional jobs. So I think this is a very good example to show what is really possible if these factors are coming together.
And finally, sir, the German mandatory due diligence law doesn't just apply to Bangladesh and Pakistan, it applies to everywhere. And it doesn't just apply to the apparel sector, it applies to all sectors that have significant impacts. How much this mix of governments coming together with the brands, the suppliers, the trade unions and others, how much can that be replicated? I think Christine has already put a vision that this could happen, a accord could happen elsewhere in Asia, maybe in the MENA region, etc. Is that your vision too?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the SDGs, some have displayed. We all know we can only achieve this together when the private sector, the government, the civil society, and all of us actually chip in and do our bits. It has something to do also with sustainable consumption. So we have to look at our consumption patterns, which are here in Europe or in the west part of the world. And we really have to understand that we can only solve this kind of problems which are relevant to all of us. I think we are all aware of whatever happens, it always has an impact of all of us because the world is so connected. And that also means that the problems, the challenges we have, we can only achieve together. And I also feel that in this area, it's very important that also the countries are working together. That's why we also support with different projects the exchange between Pakistan, between Bangladesh, India, and Cambodia, and other parts. Because yes, the conditions are different, but the topics are very much the same. And you have to learn from each other, and you can also support each other in moving things forward.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Rana, on that? And Krista, yes, both of you. Keep hold of that.
Just coming to Tobias's comments, one for the uncovered factories under RSC, there is a system called LIMA. It's an inspection system that ILO has put in place with the government, so the government can inspect all the factories. That's one. Number two, talking about sustainability, very quickly, out of the 100 greenest factories in the world, 50 of them are in Bangladesh. And this was done by the manufacturers themselves, not prompted by anyone. So we have taken sufficient steps towards sustainability. And number three, Tobias, I had a question for you. When you started talking, you said you would help bring all the countries together to stop the race to the bottom. How would you do it? Because that's a project that we would love to be a part of.
I think you've got to answer that question. then we'll come to Christine. You're making my job as moderator very easy here. This is good. No,
Thank you for putting me on the spot on that. I thought I had formulated it a little bit different. I mean, what we can provide is a platform to do so. To just be enabled, and that's what we also have done in the past, to bring people together. I mean, that's one of our roles we do, to just create platforms and possibilities to exchange and to discuss certain things. But we can, of course, not do it on the behalf of the countries. The countries and the industries, the unions have to come together and do this. And we can play our part on that, show international experiences, support that, but we cannot do it for you.
But you actually did it. You have helped them. I mean, I don't want to talk on behalf of the manufacturers, but
why not?
Why not? But you helped the manufacturers come together and put together a list of sustainable terms of purchasing practices, like what they think the good standards are. Now, we from the trade unions want to have brands have good purchasing practices, right? We want to negotiate with the manufacturers. We want to negotiate collective agreements with the manufacturers that hold brands accountable, that are supported by brands' purchasing practices. And that's a big piece of work that Industrial, together with our affiliates on action, collaboration, and transformation, have been working on. But we're missing our counterpart. We're missing our direct person that we need to negotiate with. Those are the employers. And if we're at the table, we're bringing the brands to the table around how to link purchasing practices to collective bargaining and decent wages, we're waiting for you. So if you want to help convene us, we're happy to have the assistance of GIZ in that, because we have, for the last 5-6 years, been calling on the manufacturers to meet us, to discuss this, and we're bringing some very major brands to the table. And this is how you kind of solve systemic problems. We know that there's a solution, but there's also a willingness, what you talked about, trust and empathy. These are all pieces of the puzzle that we need to kind of fit together. And before I want to finish, I just want to make one correction for you, Rubana, that under the RSC, the brands are legally bound to do what they have said to do in the international accord. So the work there in Bangladesh is legally binding on the brands. Yeah, okay. So I don't want to have any confusion that when it says, oh, in Bangladesh, it's not legally binding. If a brand does not...
From the manufacturer side, it's not.
Yes, but you should be able, but that would make the system better if the manufacturers were legally bound, because right now it's the brands who have to use their business leverage. Now, if you really wanted to have all factories covered under that, it would have to be legally bound to do that, right? Because who's going to hold everyone accountable? There has to be a legal framework for it.
I can tell there's lots of people that
Yes,
want to come in a minute, but I wanted to give Mr. Khan, you've been listening patiently in Pakistan. Is there anything you've heard from your fellow panelists that's provoked you or stimulated you? Anything you'd like to add?
I just want to add one thing here. Whenever we receive any new product, any product development from the customer, first of all, we have some conversation with them, and then they send their all standards, all their parameters regarding the compliance, regarding the perks and benefits of the workers or of the employee. And when we sign this agreement and we agree to produce their required product, so it means it's totally our liability, our responsibility to fulfill all their requirements. So I am here that I little bit disagree with Mrs. Rovana from Bangladesh, that if customer brands help us, before this, when we accept their purchase order, their project, so this is totally our responsibility to fulfill all their standards. And here in Pakistan, we are doing the same. And I am agree with Mr. Tabas Baker. I am working with their team in Pakistan. So we achieve a lot of goals and a lot of milestones with their collaboration.
All right. I would like to turn to the audience. As I do so, I think His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Faisal has one or two reflections he would like to share first. Sir, Ambassador of Pakistan to Germany, if there's a microphone that we could bring, there we go. But you could face the audience if you like, yes.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes.
I'm Mohammed Faisal. I'm the Ambassador of Pakistan. Thank you very much for a wonderful event, wonderful discussion. Many good things have happened, and there are still some challenges. We are learning from the experience of Bangladesh. Pakistan has just set up a National Compliance Center, NCC. It was inaugurated by my Commerce Minister about a week, 10 days ago. The legislative framework and everything is being set up. It will not only look at the garments and textile sector, but the entire industry. And it will have membership from it can have membership from the Accord also, and from, of course, the industry and the labor unions and et cetera, so that you have an inclusive approach. My only suggestion, an inclusive approach is the only thing that can work. If something is seen as being imposed, it will have challenges. But if you are able to generate ownership within the countries, be it Pakistan or Bangladesh or wherever, then of course it will be easier to achieve. So a lot of work is being done on the NCC and beyond, which can be your partner for the Accord. I met somebody from the Accord this morning. He has already been there 4 times to Pakistan. So, of course, now you have a partner or somebody to talk to in Pakistan to find out exactly where the common ground is and what the targets would be. There's also a need for a public-private dialogue within Pakistan and abroad also. So that can be facilitated by GIZ, anyone. Pakistan government is there, of course, to understand the challenges that are there. This is a complex phenomenon. And there is no righteous position here. I would very respectfully say that. So please try to understand the complexity of the problem. It's not as simple as one incident that happened with the ambassador in the ambassador's country in 2014 or in my country in 2014 or 15. It has many complex dimensions. We are ready to have an inclusive dialogue with everyone to achieve better results. The moral and ethical position, of course, is totally taken, but of course it would need dialogue. It would need understanding the problems that developing countries historically face, the challenges that are there, and how to overcome them. Thank you very much once again. Very grateful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Right, questions from the audience. We've got a round. We'll take as many of them as we can get. There's a hand there. If you could introduce yourself and the gentleman in front of you before you speak, and whether there's questions to the whole panel or if you're directing it to anyone in particular. Madam.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Is it working? Yeah, now it's coming. My name is Gisela Burkhardt. I'm from Femnet, a women's organization, and we are supporting partners in Bangladesh since many years. About 2 months back, I was in Bangladesh, and I must say, all what you have said sounded very good, because the security in the factories has extremely improved. So this is for sure also observed by all with whom we spoke. But I must say, working conditions did not improve. Even it's the contrary. I mean, since 5 years, the minimum salary has not been increased in Bangladesh. I can't understand that negotiations only take place every 5 years if you have an inflation rate, which is quite high also in Bangladesh. Some of the living products have increased by 100%. And some of the women really can't survive anymore. And we spoke to Rana Plaza survivors, and I must say also there, as you mentioned, many have lost a leg or an arm, the hands, so they can't work anymore in the factories. They have been compensated, and I think we were fighting for this for 2 years, so at least $30 million came together in order to compensate them. But many of these women now are just don't have anything anymore. And what they were asking for is to get a place, a house, and where they can live, because many of them they don't know from what to live, and so that they can survive somehow. So my questions would be to both of you, to Rubana as well. I would also ask Christina. Well, first of all, Rubana, what would you suggest? I know that the negotiations for the minimum salary are starting now. Are you in favor of increasing or have a shorter time phase for the next phase of negotiations, so that not every 5 years salaries are increased? That would be one. And how can you improve these working conditions? And I also know about gender-based violence, which is still existing in the factories. And Christina, I would like to know, how do you judge the system now, the RSC? Is it as good as the Accord has been before? Or would you say that there is a change and control is not as good anymore as it was before? These two questions.
Thank you. All right, very clear questions to both of you. We'll take 1 or 2 more, and then I'm sure you can remember them all. Sir.
I am from profession industrial economist, working at Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin, long time. At the moment, I'm involved in Pakistan in green financing and giving advisory to startup ecosystem promotion in Pakistan, working very closely with GIZ in Pakistan. So as an industrial economist, a couple of years back, I analyzed the exports of Pakistan toward Germany and Europe. What did I find? Very importantly, what Frau Huck said, better prices. So what I analyzed in Pakistan was that the shirt which I'm wearing production cost is around $8, $9, but it's sold in Europe 120. So there's huge margin. So there you need to do something to give them more money to install all these human rights violations, if there are any, to put money in that. This is one thing. The second very important thing which I analyzed was Pakistani exports to Germany and Europe, they were supply-driven. Supply-driven. How did I find that? I looked at the numbers of imports of EU, where I found that in the top 45 products, Pakistan was not present in these products. So here you need diversification. And how would you do that? At that time, I suggested them, Germany offers these Pakistani companies to place themselves in Germany. Once they are here, they have access to the market. They can do marketing, they can develop brands in joint ventures and other areas. So this is actually, I think we need to think more about that. So this is my remark.
That's very, very interesting. Thank you. We'll take another, if there's anybody. Oh yes, gentleman at the back, and then I'll come back to the panel.
Yes, my name is Michael Aritz from German Importers in Hamburg. I think we learned, due to the Accord, a very nice showpiece about social market economy, because here the parties, brands and the producers as well as the NGOs talked and worked together as we did it here in Germany for the last 60 years. At the moment it's a little bit harsh, but that is not my question. My question is for the Bangladeshi party here on the podium. What do you think, how big is the chance that the RSC will continue in this intensive dialogue form as it happened in the Accord times? And on the other side, for Pakistan members here, so what are the hurdles that it is not possible so far to establish an institution like the Accord? Because only with dialogue or with open discussion it will not worked out. We learned this from Bangladesh, that there is a little pressure necessary, but then you need also the time to sit together and to find solutions.
Thank you. Right, Rabana and Christina, I'm going to come to you two last, if that's okay, because you've got most to say, I think. Mr. Khan, do you want to go first? Is there anything there you'd like to respond to?
Like the last one, our friend asked about regarding the Accord. So how we establish in Pakistan is like the Bangladesh already doing a lot in the Accord sector. So as I already told you, we are very warm welcome to this standard, any standard which is provide the health and safety and which is provide the perks and benefit to the employee. We are very warm welcome to them. But again, this is not possible to only the private sector industry can achieve these all standards. For Accord, we must discuss this with our internally with the government sector, with the government authority, and we are also doing on this on the Accord, and hopefully we achieve this within a couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tobias, there's a question there about, I mean, basically access to the German market from Asian companies directly, and perhaps the frustration that the suppliers, that money isn't going back down the chain to the suppliers any more than it was 10 years ago. Well, what would you say to any of that?
Well, of course, I agree with you, and I think diversification and going down the value chain up to have more high-value product is something we will have to look into, and it's also something we support. The bigger picture, the bigger question you were talking about, how to distribute value added. I think this is, of course, something which is beyond like an organization like GIA. That's more, I think, something which, yeah, the different societies actually have to talk about. Like all the other also global initiatives we have. I think my point is really textile and the issues are at the end very similar also when we talk about climate change and things like this, because it's part for all of us, and we have to come together and discuss how to come to a common solution on that. With regards also, I just want to, one point also to Bangladesh and the victims who have been compensated but now are standing there and said, okay, what's next? I think it's very important that we foster more. Compensation is important, but integration is even more important. And really to support them that they are integrated also in the workforce again on that, which is something which in this complex is maybe sometimes also overlooked, but it's a very vital component which we have to work on.
Questions for you, particularly around wage negotiations. Yeah.
So just to correct you, in Bangladesh, every year we have 5% increment anyway. But that does not mean that the wage that they're getting right now, after the depreciation of Bangladeshi taka against US dollars, is enough. So the government has already initiated the wage board. How much should it increase? I don't know. But I'm definitely in favor of increase, that's for sure. But our ultimate appeal would be to the brands to make sure that we're at least able to pay that extra, because we are absolutely standing at the brink of literal bankruptcy. I mean, in a 4-year CAGR, prices from EU have dropped by almost 2.35%. That's a huge drop. So we are definitely not getting paid what we were getting paid earlier.
Is that due to COVID, or is that due to inflation?
You know, very honestly, it's because of consumerism that capitalism has actually promoted. If you buy one, get one free, you automatically go towards fast fashion, cheap fashion, and Bangladesh is a victim of that. Bangladesh exports $6 billion worth of just basic T-shirts. That's not the goal. The goal is value addition. The goal is actually going up towards the value chain. And yes, that's exactly what you said. And you know, we have to move away from that so that we can pay our workers more. So we have to get paid more in order for the workers to get more. So I would appeal to Christina and Najma and all of you who are here so that we all stand together and say the same thing. We want to pay our workers more, provided the brands end up paying us at least proportionately, if not more. We don't mind if they don't give us one dime extra, but for the extra wage for the workers, we must be settled. We must be compensated accordingly. Otherwise, it's a sham. So I think I answered also partly your question on how we can go towards sustainable fashion and higher value-added product. Michael, I kind of didn't get your question. You sort of said, is RSC doing what better? Sorry.
To continue in the work like the Accord did it. So in this intensive discussion, find solutions, because there are many problems still.
Sure.
So, and to do it together.
So RSC board is pretty active. I mean, we literally meet every other week. So that's one. Number two, RSC basically inherited whatever was in Accord, including the engineers. We didn't change anything. You know, and whatever changes that have happened because we have all agreed unanimously. So RSC is basically what Accord was. It's just that we made sure that industry became part of it. Because without ownership, if you push anything down the manufacturer's throat, they will always say no. And you know, a top-down approach is definitely not the best approach to go in an emerging market. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabana. Same thing, different name, Christina.
I just want to add the thing that, you know, everyone says, oh, this is a top-down approach, but I think from the trade union side, we've been calling for social dialogue on these issues. And, you know, to say that, you know, we're not trying to meet the manufacturers or the brands in this, you know, complex global supply chain is really incorrect. I mean, for the situation in Pakistan, we have initiated many, many discussions with the industry, only to be told, come back, you know, we're interested in this, come back later. Safety can't be pushed aside. We cannot come back later. We cannot come back later to Cambodia. We cannot come back later to Bangladesh. We cannot come back later to Tunisia or Myanmar. I mean, if you even think about Myanmar now, you know, you have a military coup, brands continue to source there. To talk about decent wages in the supply chain and to sit here and then you still are sourcing in Myanmar, I mean, shame on you. I mean, I think we've been really clear on that that has just been, you know, we can't, I mean, we talk about Asia, so I've kind of got a little bit off track, but I feel like we are really saying, as the global trade union movement, we are here. We want to sit down with our counterparts. We want to add value. We want to capture value for the countries that we work in. I mean, even the Bangladesh Injury Employment Scheme, it's a pilot. Let's remember that. It's only a pilot. And in that system, brands are paying a very small amount to top up from the central fund to the recommendation. And brands need to contribute that. It's a small amount of doing business in the global supply chain. So I just really want to emphasize that we are here, we are open, we have been knocking on the doors on these issues throughout the last 10 years. So it's, yeah.
Just a correction. I think you misunderstood me. What I meant by top-down approach was, when International Accord came in, it was a top-down approach because there was no industry there, and industrial considerations were actually not taken into consideration. For instance, you know, industry paid a lot extra because we were also ill-advised. Accord was also new. It was all an experiment. So we learned through the experiment, but if national discourse was involved from day one, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had to pay extra for all the compliances that we did. You know, we literally imported a lot of fire alarms which don't even work because of the humidity. I mean, that's a lesson for Pakistan to learn. You must make sure when you enter a dialogue that you are very, very well considered in the entire discourse. This is what I was saying. In terms of social dialogue, of course, I mean, Bangladesh would be a willing partner to this, Christina. We've been partners through the most critical phases. So all we are asking is, since the minimum wage is being revised, let us remember minimum price brings minimum wage, decent price brings decent wage, fair price brings fair wage, period. So, yeah, raise your prices, that's it. So we can't do it. We don't have the negotiating power unless, again, something or the other comes up and all of you help us.
This is brilliant for the next panel because we really will get into these issues and I'm afraid we'll take your question for the next panel. Before we say thank you to this panel, I just want to say that we're just going to, in a minute, start just under a half an hour coffee break. We'll be back at 10:45 German time. Please, when you get your coffee or your tea, do go and see the information booths down to the left. There is a booth for the International Accord that has already been referenced several times. Act on Living Wages, GIZ's operations in Bangladesh and Pakistan, the Industry We Want initiative, ILO Better Work, and the Dindigul Agreement that we'll hear a bit more about on the next panel as well. So do take your coffee, network, talk to each other, but also go and see the experts at those tables. But please show your appreciation to the panel. Thank you. I wanted to say hi, but
Hi. Is it here? Or
yes,
is it, yeah.
please.
Okay. Hi.
Hi,
How
I'm
are
John.
we met already?
Yeah, we met you.
Okay. I guess we've got 70% success at the moment in terms of just the 30% of you at the back of the room. Please find a seat. And welcome back those of you online who've gone and had a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, gone back to bed maybe if you're in the US, gone to bed if you're in Asia, you know. But welcome back. Welcome back to everybody here in the room in Berlin. I think we had a good discussion on the previous panel, yeah. Began to get some of the issues onto the table. And this is the perfect panel to pick those issues up now and to take them forward. The key challenges for the future. And to get us started, I will introduce you each in turn. But Nazma Atka is the founder and executive director of the Amaj Foundation. Many of us have known Nazma for a long time. Well, it feels like a long time.
Yeah.
It does. Almost 10 years. 10 years, yes. You've been listening to the previous panel. We began to get questions about, well, what about wages? What about sexual abuse in the workplace? Some of the other challenges that happen within industry that aren't directly related to the integrity of buildings. But I'd love to get your views of the past 10 years. What has worked for the women you represent? What hasn't worked? And what do you think are the challenges as we go forward, Nazma?
Thank you, John. It's very pleasure to meet with you always. And first I met with you in Berlin, also in GIZ program. So still we are continue. The progress, if I'm saying, I cannot say that there is no progress, but we need to measure the progress. That is first suggestion to everyone. And if I'm saying the safety issue, you know, when I was working in the factory since 1990, there was a fire incident. There was 26 workers was died, including one of the supplier. Till 2013 Rana Plaza, there is a second, 2 times was the building collapse. And how many times was the fire incident? Every morning, every afternoon, everything. It's a multi-story buildings, whole factory, number of factory. So that's the things has changed because of the accord. And accord is a legal binding initiative who changed the worker safety and life things. Enough, I'm going to that because the Rana Plaza, it is not the accident, it's a murder. Building collapse before the day, the manufacturer, the government, everybody knows the factory is not safe. The crack, everybody found, but the workers, when they went there, and workers said, we don't want to work that unsafe workplace. And they told them, because the 24th of April, and after 6 days, the month will be end, and they need to get the salary. And if you are not go to the work, and you will not pay the salary. So then, you know, they went to the factory, and after 90 minutes, the factory was collapsed. I seen in the previous evening in the television, the factory is not safe, kind of things, but it is going to be, when electricity has gone, to start the generator for work. Even the building cannot load the vibration, and immediately it's gone out. And the things, we have some union, we have number of union in Bangladesh, but most of the union are represented by the company, because the union should have negotiation power, women should has the leadership, they have to be collective bargaining. How many factory has the collective bargaining? It is very hard, like in my organization, we have like 75 union, only 16 union we have signed the collective bargaining. In Bangladesh, my union, our union has the largest collective bargaining where we increase 10% to 7% salary, women's position, promotion, but the thousands of union, even worker doesn't know who is the union representation. So we have changed, but the reality is not that much change. And if we are talking about the women's workers, the auto machine, it's also declining job of women. It's also creating difficulty women. Bangladesh is a very second largest export country in the rest of the world, and Germany is very important for us. But gender-based violence, sexual harassment, during the pandemic, when the company like Europe, America, holding suspension and cancellation the order and asking for the discount, my prime minister, our prime minister gave 5,000 crore taka from our taxpayer money for the 3-month salary of garments workers. The garments worker didn't work only 1 month, and they pay only 60% salary. And rest of the 2-month salary, where they goes? So the garments workers gave lots, but they get less. And even they couldn't get the salary. Number of workers lost their job. A lot of pregnant women was dismissed because they have to pay the compensation, maternity protection. So these kind of things are happening, the COVID time. So the change we have, but if I told you that before, the measure need to be done. And systemic change need to be done. We need to be equal power, which is I also told in Paris, also I'm telling, and Miss Kulfar is here, and she also agree with me. The supplier and brand, man and woman, rich and poor, and workers and supplier, that power should be equally distributed, otherwise it won't be happen. The whole supply chain, they are talking about the transparency, lot of effort people do. We don't want to the volunteer effort. We don't want to the charity. We want dignified workplace. We want living wage. And we want freedom of association. In Bangladesh, we have the law. We have the union rights. We have to the collective bargaining. But is this only the brand problem to sign the collective bargaining? Because Christina, she's a global leader. She's talking on the perspective of the global. But I am a Bangladeshi. We have the regulation, we have the system, but how many manufacturers respect the freedom of association? How many respect the women's? Every day the gender-based violence and sexual harassment is a key issue in our country. How many company has the effective safety gender-based violence committee? And also how many women lead the union? That is the question. Like my union, I'm trying to do, because I am worker, I'm the woman, and I know how to the sexual harassment, reproductive health, women's hunger. The inflation in Bangladesh, how many times had John? You don't know, my dear brother. You know, our workers are so hungry. It's very difficult, even ordinary middle-class people to survive. Because our workers, if I'm going to 5 years back, the salary was increased. It was $95. Today, it's $75. How they have to survive? Things are so expensive. You guys also know how expensive in your country. So $75 is our minimum wage. Even when every year the wage is increased, the basic salary is cutting. Basic salary, when you have, you get the bonuses, you get the overtime payment, maternity, all benefit. But when you cut your original salary, and now it's a 52% our basic salary. When I was in the wage board, it was like 66%. So this is the change, and this is the things, how the workers are declining. So these kind of things happen, and climate change also a big issue, because climate nexus, gender pay gap, and also we need to be just transaction issues also related, because most of Bangladesh was beautiful, green, ever country, but now you can see the high-rise building like this, you cannot see green like that. All corporate are destroy our nature, destroy our culture, and now it's affected because this year, 41 degrees Celsius, people cannot survive in this country. We are not used to like that kind of climate, but we have nothing to do. So as a cheap labor, the concept, there is no respect, no dignity. I know because just I had a talk with the Better Work. Who has power? Most of the power has brand, and the power has the supplier. So they need to respect not only profit, the greedy people. Happen so many accidents, even Pakistan Ali Enterprise. So therefore, we want all the solution, and we need to work together and make the better, not only the profit, it should be also life and livelihood. Bangladeshi garments workers, the women's workers, their children are separate from the mother because there is no sufficient adequate daycare center. And 2 months baby are in the countryside. Can you believe, can you imagine? Because the mental, physical growth is difficult. It's a problem because even they don't have sufficient food. Women are mentally disturbed because they couldn't take care of their baby, and breastfeeding rights also. It's not only the ways, whole aspect of the human rights. That is the important issue. As a human, the basic fundamental rights, if we don't get when we work, then how we have to think the things has been changed. Yes, we have, because the safety issue is a legal binding and it's an effort, but we need to be, more company has to sign, especially the North American company. They are very much reluctant, they don't much care, so they have to be sign the accord and also international accord in Pakistan.
So, thank you, Nazma. I think you set out a whole range of challenges there. Yeah. The buildings are not collapsing anymore. There still are fires, right? There are still workplace deaths in your country. Let's not pretend it's gone away, right? As there are in many countries. But you set out a range of other challenges, right? Particularly challenges facing women in relation to living wage and gender equality, but maybe some of the newer challenges around climate change that have got worse in the past 10 years. And in real terms, you've also mentioned that salaries have also suffered. And you talked about measurement. You started by saying we need to be better at measuring things. But just give us a sense of the 2 or 3 things that you think we could start agreeing on that could really make a difference, so that in 10 years' time, we're not back here talking about one more piece of progress. Bangladesh hopefully will be a middle-income country in 10 years' time, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the position of your members will be better. What would you like to see?
Okay, thank you. But if Bangladesh, I also love to be Bangladesh will be mid-income country. But if the suppliers' profit and wage and garments workers are below poverty wage, how will be mitigated and how will be matched? That is the question also me. I don't have so many things to say to change. Garments workers need living wage and fair wages. Garments workers need freedom of association and collective bargaining. Garments workers need safe workplace, and garments workers need respect and dignity. That's, if happen, we don't need to so many things.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Kofler, you are the Parliamentary State Secretary for BMZ. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for the conference. I think it's already proven how important it is to keep talking about these issues. We've heard a bit on the previous panel about German development cooperation in the context of Bangladesh and Pakistan, but how is your government trying to address some of the challenges that we've heard this morning? And give us a bit of your vision. Thank you.
Well, speaking after Nazma, what can I say more? So it's always a challenge, honestly, to speak after you. No, what we are trying to do is support, at the first hand, we were supporting to implement the accord, which was taking place in 2014, and we were starting as a BMZ already in that time to support Bangladesh on the way to have a better safety on the workspace, which I think is very important. You were pointing out that, Nasma, that there are changes were undertaken, and it was important for us to support that. We are supporting also coming up with the ideas, for example, of an insurance when an accident is happening, where not the workers are paying for it first, but the brands are paying. And I think that makes a difference also. And in Bangladesh, we started in 1st of July, I think it was, last year with that assurance, which I think can help workers. And at least, if I look on the victims of Rana Plaza, there were more than 1,100 people dead and more than 2,500 injured. And I remember this painful discussion where years after that incredible catastrophe, nobody got any financial support. I remember meetings 2 years after that catastrophe, also with German brands who were heavily involved, who said, well, I don't know to whom to pay and so on and so on. So nobody really gets support. So that's why we are working on the insurance issue where the workers don't have to pay for it, but where the responsible for the economy have to invest in. That's something very important. We are working also on the German side very heavily in supporting companies that they know what could they do and what should be done. So we have a help desk here in Berlin. Were more in the last year, more than 2,000 companies were calling in. They have a pretty good online tools to know how to deal also with our due diligence law, to see how they can implement the law. The law was of big importance. I want to underline that. The law was of really big importance for us. We were fighting for that, as BM said. We are supporting a European due diligence directive, which I think is very important to come up, because I always underline what Nasma was saying. I'm in favor of a mandatory law-framed system, because then it helps also, it's a situation where everybody knows what they should do, and it's the same for everybody. And I think that is important, but it's also important for those who got violated in their rights to get an important support there. And now we are working together with partners of ILO, with OECD and others. We are working on the issue of living wages, which I think is quite crucial. I think positive moments have been undertaken, or positive aspects have been undertaken when it's coming to the security issue. There still are challenges, but there is a positive movement, and I think positive movements we have to also point out. But there is a lot more to do if it's coming to living wages. And everybody here in the room sitting can imagine if you're working the whole week and you are not able, not even to feed your family, but not only to even to feed yourself, to find a decent place to live, to find a decent surrounding for educating the kids and feeding yourself at the end of the day. If that's not possible by the end of the day of a full-time job, that's nothing, has nothing to do with human dignity. So living wages is important. I'm hoping the handbook of the OECD, which should come up in, I think in autumn, should come up, is helping also to implement, because at the end of the day, it's not about paper and guidelines here, it's about implementing on the ground. And that handbook, and we are supporting that, as BM said, is supporting and giving guidelines how a win-win situation can be created. Because it's not against those who are coming up with ideas or entrepreneurs, but it's coming up of having a fair balance in between all the actors, like Nasma also was pointing out, and how a win-win situation can be created. Because at the end of the day, what you were telling about young mothers, with their mindset, of course, somewhere else, because they don't have a place to have a safe and proper daycare for their kids, for example, as an example, one of the points. of course you are not so, if I may use the economic term, so productive than if you have your mindset and your heart free to come up with all the creativity you have on your worksphere. And there is a lot of proof that the better the conditions for the workers are, the better the outcome, the result for the factory at the end of the day is. And to point that out and to support that is something we also do as a BMZ. And may I say, I'm a member of a trade union since I'm 16, so of course I'm always supporting collective bargaining. I think that's one of the instruments also to create a peaceful society, because then you are arguing about discussions and about disparities in a society in a peaceful manner, and you're coming to solutions which coming to, at the end, to a solution for both sides acceptable. And that's, for me, collective bargaining is a part of creating peaceful, stable, and in crisis resistant societies. So I only can ask everybody who has responsibility in that case, make freedom of association possible.
Minister, while you've still got the microphone, just through the perspective of your new Supply Chain Act in this country, does the RSC and the Accord, I mean, is that good due diligence through the eyes of that act?
It's part of a good diligence. It's part because it's coming up with very important ideas of safety at the workplace, for example, and that is crucial, that your a building is not collapsing, that workers and everybody who's in the building is not getting injured, is not getting in the fire, dying in fire accidents or whatever. It's very important. So safety and security on the workplace is an important part. But if you look in the law, and that's not our invention in Germany, it's a process which was scientifically developed by Professor Ruggie over a decade, with discussions all over the planet, not only in Western countries, but all over the planet. It's about that a company is taking responsibility from the head of the company, from the CEO, for what is going on. And it's not a CSR department who is somehow printing brochures. Sorry for being so in that, but I've seen a lot of nicely looking brochures in my lifetime. It's about analyzing the risks, and they might be different in different areas of the world. There are different risks on violation of human rights and also of social and ecological standards. And then finding solutions, starting a process. I know there's no button you simply press and then everything is fine. But it's about starting a process, if you analyze the risk, how to minimize the risk. And this process, that's what we call risk management, that is something I think we can expect. And you would do it if it's coming to pure economical issues. Every company is asking, do I have a risk in getting my products at time to my customer? And analyzing the risks on that, everybody's doing, clearly, it's logical. Why not doing that if it's coming to a human rights violation?
Absolutely. One last question to you. We heard from the previous panel, actually from the audience, that beyond due diligence, right, is the issue of, well, Nazma's mentioned living wage. We heard from the previous discussion that manufacturers don't feel they're being rewarded by German or European consumers and the brands, right? And T-shirts are as cheap in real terms as they were 10 years ago. What is, you know, as a member of the government here, what is your expectation of your own government in terms of consumer behavior, but also companies like the one who's going to speak in a second, in terms of their purchasing practices? What are your expectations there?
Well, of course I hear that, and in a certain way it's always true that people looking for cheap products. Yeah, I think that's all over the planet, the same issue and the same problem. But there's always also quite a lot of evidence that people would pay a higher price, and to be honest, then I want to see the calculation. Because to double the income, if you have a minimum wage of 75 euros a month, to double that to 150, at the end of the day, I want to see a calculation how that really affects the price in Europe. There are other things in the calculation which are also somehow the issue. So we have to really be clear what is then maybe doubling prices here or whatever. But we also have evidence that people here are willing to pay a fair difference, not a bigger range for commercial purposes, but a fair difference for higher wages, for example, if they get the guarantee that the fair wages are really paid at the end of the day. And that's what is making consumers sometimes reluctant, because they don't trust that if I pay more for a t-shirt, and then at the end of the day it's true. You can buy a very expensive t-shirt from a high-ranking company here, and it's produced with catastrophic background or with non-fair wages. So you can tell by the price you're paying here how it is produced at the end of the day. And if the consumers have more clarity about that, this difference, and I really want to see a calculation then. Yeah, it's always telling them the t-shirt is double as expensive. I don't believe that. They are willing to do more because they don't want to see people dying in factories. They don't want to see children without education, and they don't want to see people without access to health if it's needed.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in the discussion. Michael, you're next. Head of Sustainability, CNA Europe. I'm old enough, we were talking during the coffee, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you had stores in my country, in the UK, and we all went to school with our CNA coats on, and we all looked the same. It was almost like, and I miss those days, but it was before Brexit. That's just made it worse. We heard a lot, right? We've heard the perspective of suppliers, we've heard the perspective of trade unions, we've heard the perspective of government. You're in the middle of all this. You're not paying your suppliers enough, you're not incentivizing them, you've got this mandatory due diligence requirements now. You are a member of the International Accord. This is, you know, give us your perspectives on some of the things you've heard already today, and then take us forward. What should our expectations be of you going forward? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, a little correction, because Dr. Kofel looked at me as a sustainability guy. I'm not a sustainability guy, I'm a CSR guy. Head of social service.
Oh, it says head of sustainability, that's wrong.
Was a little bit wrong.
Okay.
We have
Sorry.
integrated at CNA the, let's say, social responsibility within our sourcing department, so in the procurement part, not in the, let's say, as a somewhere sustainability department, just to get that. I think starting with Rana Plaza, which was already...
Oh, microphone. Switch microphones, yeah, that one's not working so well.
Starting with Rana Plaza.
Okay.
Is it now good? Yeah. Starting with Rana Plaza, which was, of course, as already mentioned, a wake-up call. I think we, as a brand, we were quite unpleasant for many other countries than Bangladesh at that time, because the excellent work of the Accord team in Bangladesh was also transferable into many other countries. And let's say, whilst we were lacking a little bit the expertise of a professional engineer, because we had no professional engineers in our company, in terms particularly of building safety, we could easily adapt certain things about fire safety and electrical safety as well in countries like Cambodia or Pakistan or any other places in the world. So that was, with all the tragedy behind it, a very good learning for us as a company. And we invested, and that was, let's say, I'm talking now till 2015, 16, we invested a lot in people in our company in order to, let's say, follow our due diligence at that time. Which is at the moment changing. I don't know who it was, but somebody mentioned earlier on that, for example, audit is a failure. I think it was Christina. Fully agree. Fully agree. Audit is a failure. We are coming from audits. We have stopped audits completely. At CNA, we have, let's say, I will not say outsourced it, but we have, we are now part of an initiative where we are doing audits together with not our team, we have outsourced it to many brands, but we have kept our auditors, our former auditors in the company, and they are doing now totally different work, more value-added work, because My personal aim, I'm now in charge for this department since 2017. My personal aim is I want to create lasting changes in factories and not quick fixes like it was always in the past.
So just to clarify, how does the auditing happen? It happens through multi-stakeholder initiatives?
We are part of the so-called Social Labor and Convergence Program,
okay.
which is an initiative which started very slowly 3 years ago, and we are now on the way to conduct in 10,000 factories,
right.
let's say together with other big brands, audits.
So you share an audit
we share
company.
We share. We get the audit fatigue. I remember.
Do you audit each other's factories? Is there peer review? Do you audit each other's factories?
No. It's a different team. So
Yeah.
first of all, it's involvement in the factories, and with the help, of course, also of the Better Work team, which let's say endorsed the methodology. It's also starting with a self-assessment, where also particularly in Better Work countries, the workers are involved in this one. Getting their point of view as well about the factory into the audit system, and then later it's a verification. But that is for us only the basis. That's the basis of seeing where something. We are really taking these results as a basis in order to drive far more important measurements, which is remediation, which we hopefully are joining as well with the help of Better Work together as a kind of joint remediation, where it's not CNA team doing the remediation anymore, but it's a combined team of various stakeholders. And that leads me to the whole part where we are in at the moment. It's all about collaboration. It will not work. We are, a player, quite an important player in the market, I would call us still. But we, as CNA, we cannot solve it at our own. We can take our contribution to it. But I think we learned that we need to collaborate. We need to collaborate with other brands, which was also openly in the beginning an issue because we are competitors on the other side as well, which is normal. But we are collaborating with other brands. We are collaborating with unions. We are collaborating with people like the ILO Better Work, and we are collaborating also with other multi-stakeholder initiatives. At the moment, to be honest with you, and that's more practical part, we are sometimes overwhelmed. Let's say if I would list all the initiatives where we could contribute and help, it's long, and that shows also the dilemma of the industry. There's still a lot of things to do, and before I close it, I would like to also spend a word on the international accord in Pakistan. I think for you, Excellency, it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. I think that the international accord is reaching out to Pakistan, and I'm part of the International Accord Steering Committee, and I would really ask for also your governmental collaboration in order to get that. It's an unpleasant thing at the beginning. I think Mrs. Hack can confirm that at the beginning it is painful for all the players, but I think it showed in Bangladesh that it has a value. And the international accord in Pakistan is clearly mentioned not as there are some Western brands together with union who are saying what Pakistani have to do. This is not the case. We are looking for real involvement of the industry. We are welcoming the industry, getting them on board to have a real tripartite element like we have at the moment with the RSC in Bangladesh. But I think the collaboration needs to come from all the sides. It doesn't need to come only from unions and from brands. It needs to come as well from the industry. And my plea to you is really promote us in your country, promote us with the suppliers, that we are really making a step forward and getting, next to the beautiful pictures we saw from the supplier on the picture, there are other factories in other areas of Pakistan, as you know, which are maybe more challenging. And I think we can commonly together do some valid steps in order to improve there as well the safety in this country.
Just while you've still got the microphone, I was struck by what Rabana said on the last panel from a supplier perspective, almost sounding quite critical of the sort of model of capitalism we have in Europe and the diktats of the fashion industry. So in a way, it's as much a question to your marketing team as, and I know you don't sit in marketing, but to what extent does that then translate into purchasing practices and the way that you treat your suppliers? Is there a better way that we can do fashion? And does that also include price? I mean, it's come up again and again. You didn't take it in your first remarks, but do you also believe your consumers will reward you financially for taking them on that kind of journey? Or is it just wishful thinking? Because I honestly, we've been talking about this for a very long time. I worked in a company 20 years ago. We were talking about it then. This issue of the ethical consumer, it's moved a little bit perhaps on climate, but maybe not so much on living wage and working conditions. Is this something within our reach, Michael?
I'm not 100% sure, to be very honest and open, because let's say in representative calls, you get, let's say if you call somebody on the street, would you pay more for this and that, you get easily a yes, whilst then the purchasing decision in a store can look completely different. That is also what we experienced a little bit in our research.
You don't see a trend then?
I have to admit I haven't seen this trend in the past views, which we have seen with our internal knowledge, but that is CNA specific. I have to say, what has changed also in what we call responsible purchasing practices is completely also the model how you operate. I'm now in the industry quite a long time already, and I remember my days at a buyer. I think I was first time in 2000 in Bangladesh, something like that, where you were looking at that time I was buying pajamas. Here's a pajama, that's the price, whatever, X dollars, and then you were negotiating about the price for the new pajama. That was the way. Today, that is not only due to responsible purchasing practices, but also for us as a company interesting. You need to look at planning together with the supplier, the production capacity. That's key, that production lines are fulfilled. You need to look in your pricing on, we apply an open costing methodology where we're really putting down the final price of a pajama into various cost elements, where wage is one of them. And as we are committed and to fund a founding member of the ACT initiative on living wages, we are, let's say, trying our best. I don't say we are perfect, not at all, but we are trying our best to apply responsible purchasing practices. Is it on capacity planning, but then on costing, also on ring-fencing the labor cost element, that we are not touching that we are discussing, for example, with a supplier, if we are not matching the price, can we do a different print? Can we use a different fabric? But we are not touching the labor costs element. But open costing has also a couple of elements. And one of the elements is as well that it needs to be also a kind of collaboration and openness from both sides. It's, let's say, in the beginning, I remember when I was more in the commercial department still, we had a lot of issues where we found certain profits hidden under certain cost elements. I think it's a collaboration. If you're talking about a fair pricing, open costing is for sure an element which you can use, and there you can also act responsible. And responsible purchasing practices, and that's my last statement for this, is important. We have completely adapted all the 5 responsible purchasing practices elements of the ACT initiative. And we have just undergone the survey. I know our figures, which are rather positive, I have to say. Especially what I'm proud of is internal, because responsible purchasing practices doesn't live if my team and myself are living them up. It has to be our designers, it has to be our buyers, it has to be our sourcing people. And we got quite positive respondents from our last survey. It's not yet 100% finally finished, but I'm quite pleased with, let's say, the efforts of education we did as a department in order to train as well our commercial people, and we have also their constant fluctuation, of course, about responsible purchasing practices.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you. Connor Boyle, last but not least, Director ad interim, which is Latin for you're the director of the Better Work program at the ILO, the International Labour Organization based in Geneva. lots to pick up on here. I mean, I don't even know where to set you up. I mean, a lot of things we've been talking, a lot of things that feel, for somebody who steps in and out of this discussion, some things just feel like Groundhog Day, whilst some things do feel that they've moved. And I guess you're in a brilliant position to tell us what really is moving and what isn't. So, the floor's yours.
Great, thank you so much. And first of all, thanks very much to GIZ and to BMZ for having us. It's a really rich and very, very important discussion. Nazma, at the end, you asked her about metrics, and she talked about fair wages and living wages and respect for workers' rights and responsibilities around freedom of association and collective bargaining. And most importantly, she talked about just respect and dignity in our industry. And I think that we all would agree is absolutely where we need to be going. And I think venues like this and opportunities like this help us to start to set that scene. Then you talked to Michael, and he said, no, I'm not sustainability. I come from sourcing, and in my company now, we've blended the two. And we see that with like-minded companies, that increasingly we see not CSR or sustainability as just being something, an add-on extra sitting in the back corner, but increasingly part of the communication and the decision-making within the company. I think that's very, very important from a private sector brand's perspective. We have to take a longer-term approach, right? We really do. Audits, Christina said it, they don't really work. I think SLCP is a good example of what could be, in the sense that everyone's lining up. And as we know, it's very rare in our industry that a particular brand is sourcing 100% in any factory. In fact, it could be 10%, 20%, 30%, 20%. So you have all these competing interests ultimately trying to do the same thing. So SLCP, to reduce the duplication of audits, to try and make us think a little bit differently, to think a longer-term, more comprehensive approach is very important. I disagree a little bit with Michael in the sense that audits don't do anything, because I do think if they're done properly, they give us a snapshot at a given time of what's going on in a factory. And then that's something that we can build on. He talked about joint remediation. You know, this is what we do at Better Work. We have advisory services, we have training, capacity building services, and we have assessment services. This is really what the SLCP is trying to wrap their heads around right now, and we're very happy to be part of all of that. So it has to be a comprehensive approach to address these problems, to get to where Nazma says we need to get to, respect and dignity in our industry. We have to have policy and regulation, and we've been talking about that, and what's happening in Germany, what's happening in the EU, what's happening in the Dutch conversations as well. These are all very, very important steps in the right direction. Moving from the Accord to the RSC is a very important step in the right direction, as Rubana said, because now it is owned and the responsibility falls on the Bangladeshis, as it should, because it's their country, it's their citizens, it's their industry. So the RSC is a great natural movement in the right direction in terms of ownership, in terms of responsibility. I applaud all of that. Social dialogue as a building block into greater conversations around freedom of association must be a very important part of the process. Workers and managers, and at times governments, must sit down together at the enterprise level, and they also must sit together at the sectoral and the national level as well. And again, I think there's a lot we can do with the SLCP to think beyond the self-assessment and the verification process, to see it as a tool for social dialogue, to bring workers and managers together, again, to take responsibility at the enterprise level to try and drive this change, to try and drive improvements. I think that's very important. We talked about the importance of moving beyond fast fashion thinking and $75 a month minimum wages, which we would all agree are not going to be a living wage, not a fair wage or anything like that. Workers having to work overtime. My colleague from Cambodia is here. I lived in Cambodia for 14 years. I saw it. It was $45 a month when I started in Cambodia. Now I think it's closer to $200. It's a step in the right direction, but the only way the Cambodian workers and the Bangladeshi workers can really survive is to work overtime. So it's a full work week, but it's actually a 6 to 7 day work week. It's 10 to 12 to 14 hours of peak production time work day. These are horrendous for any of us, you know, they really are. So we have to think differently. We have to have workers' voice. Upskilling is a way that we're going to address this race to the bottom scenario that we talked about earlier, right? Giving workers more career advancement opportunities, more voice, more representation is crucial. Women workers make up 80% of our industry. And I must admit, it's starting to bubble up in these conversations, but I don't think we've talked enough about that yet today. Women workers are 80% of our industry. In Bangladesh, I think it's about 60%, right? But it's still a very important step in the right direction. So making sure that women have a voice in these committees, that women are representing other women in trade unions, such as NASMA at the peak, but down at the enterprise level, is crucial. Giving women the skills so that they can become production managers, they can become industrial engineers, so that they can have career advancement is crucial. Rana is very quiet about some of the brilliant things she does behind the scenes, but working with young women to get them tertiary level education is a brilliant step in the right direction. So all of these things are very, very important. And as Michael said, as we've heard, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We have to bring the governments, the unions, the employers together, and the private sector to drive this change, whether it's in Pakistan, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's in Cambodia, whether it's anywhere else. All of these are very, very important steps, I think, to address all
And
these
do you think
issues.
we're reaching some kind of tipping point with the European mandatory due diligence and these sort of slightly tougher rules, also trade sanctions and other things we see coming? You know, can we expect in 10 years' time, if we're all sitting here again, that the progress has not just been a slow, shallow, straight line, but there's actually a bit of an exponential curve? I mean, how would you?
Yeah, I don't think progress is ever a linear process.
It's more of a spiral.
It can be spiral, it can be a little bit up and down. But we would all agree, since the tragedies of Rana Plaza 10 years ago yesterday, the Bangladeshi industry has improved dramatically from a safety, building integrity, fire issue. At Better Work, we do very comprehensive audits and remediation work, and there's still a lot of non-compliance issues around safety and health alone. Forget the rest of working conditions and all these other issues. But yes, are we seeing improvement? Yeah, as I said, brands are thinking differently. We have a program called the Better Work Academy, where we work with our brand partners. The whole focus is on industrial relations, is getting them to think differently beyond audits, to get them to realize they have to bring a worker's voice into the conversation. You know, these are very important steps in the right direction. Rana said herself, I think of the 100 main lead firms in Bangladesh, 50 of the greenest companies are Bangladeshi, right? Yeah. Okay, this is an industry where, you know, still to this day, we look upon as Bangladesh factories as being bad, as being dirty, as being unproductive, and yet they also are the industry benchmark at the same time.
Leapfrogging,
yeah.
right. Okay.
So we are moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
But we have to do it collectively. I think our colleague from GIZ said that. Yep. And it is not a linear process.
Thank you, Connor. Right. I'm wanting to let you guys in, but to start that off, His Excellency Musharraf Hussain Budayan from the Ambassador of Bangladesh to Germany has some reflections, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. Sir.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank BMZ and GIZ for organizing such a good event for interaction among the government, the employers, and the employees. And I have prepared a written statement. However, I will not go through the whole process. I just want to mention that I have been working with the government for about 42 years in Bangladesh, and the history of the development of RMG industries in Bangladesh is about 40 years, and the initial days were a bit, I mean, if you say that the wages were very low, but day by day, these have been changed quite a lot. And actually, after Rana Plaza, the situation has improved tremendously. Otherwise, the brands will not go to Bangladesh. And the government acted as facilitators. Many rules and trade union rules, labor laws, etc., have been changed. But even then, if you heard from the side of the laborers or the labor representatives, you will always hear the dark sides. And if you hear from the employer's side, you will hear the bright sides. But there have been tremendous change. And the Accord and other organizations are always after that. Let me mention, we have some, foreign direct investment in Bangladesh Export Processing Zone authorities. And the foreign direct investments will not remain there or sustain if we give the freedom of the trade union in its what happens in Bangladesh. Because in our country, the government sector, the industrial sector, has been ruined with the atrocities of the trade unions. When the trade union leaders are there, they will not work. They will extort money from the workers, and then they will put demands which are not, just. And for that reason, the situation in our country is a compromise. And you will see that at present, the government and the employers and the unions more or less are satisfied with the situation that is prevailing in our country. So the situation that all are now, the ILO, the international organizations, the Employers Association, all are now working together, the Accord, the alliances. They have visited quite frequently the factories of Bangladesh. And you see, you have already heard the situation that out of 10 top factories in the world, 8 are in Bangladesh. And out of about 155, out of top 200, 153 is in Bangladesh. And we have many lead factories, and the progress is much better. I visited some of the factories while I was in the government and the Ministry of Commerce. In many cases, there are facilities, but sometimes, as Nazma has mentioned about the children and the situation, there are facilities, but sometimes they don't bring their children here. They like to keep the children at home. Maybe there are people, they have grandmother, grandfather to take care of the children. But you see, women empowerment in Bangladesh over the years have improved quite well. And in these factories, 60% out of the 4 million workers, 60% are women, and many of them have improved their living standards. And nowadays, the country, I recognize that there are income inequalities, but the marginal workers, marginal people, they are also well off than before. So, I mean, the important thing is that the the brands should give fair prices, and price rise is very important for the workers to get better prices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Take a couple of other yes, but anybody else who hasn't spoken, yes, you're from the previous, so you can go first because you were waiting. The lady behind, that's it, yeah. We'll take these two, and then I'll allow everyone the right to reply from the panel too. Yes. Introduce yourself too, please.
Good morning, everyone. I am Khainza Ao. I am the president of Industrial Worker Federation of Myanmar. But now I live in Germany because I think you all know we have a military coup in Myanmar in 2021. I was in Germany at the time. So the military issued arrest warrant for me, and the accusation is for the treason. Because my organization announced we don't accept the coup and we don't work with them. So that is how I became criminal. I thank the German government to give me refugee status here. Today we discuss about decent work, very important for the workers, especially in garment industry. We discussed about the important element: cooperation, coordination, transparency, and the importance of the role of the stakeholder. Who are the stakeholders? We have to work together to achieve the decent work. It is obvious that governments, employer representatives, trade unions, and the brands, ILO, and like GIZ, many other international and internet NGOs. Their role is very important. Yes, and now EU is also doing a program in Myanmar called MATE, Multi-Stakeholder Alliance for Decent Employment for Garment Sector. Can you believe that this program can achieve the goal? While the civilian government officers are in jail, some got killed. Many are in hiding, like trade unions, like me. And employer in Myanmar, they don't talk about decent work, even before the coup. We have an ILO program in Myanmar, like the garment industry project. They did not involve in the program. And we also have a separate social dialogue program with Chibo, Asian Man, and but they did not involve in our program before the coup. And now they are working with the military. But European employer organization, Eurocham in Myanmar, is implementing MATE project. Can we achieve their goal for the decent work? No. I think you agree with me. But this program is funded by the EU, 3 million project, and also fashion brand supporting. Over 100 brands are still in Myanmar. I want to name some of the brand. Asian Man, like an Asian Man. It's shameful. I don't know Asian Man is here or not. I thank to CNA, they left Myanmar very early because they are aware about this situation. We collected about 200 cases violation in Myanmar. And yesterday, I found a report that garment industry is growing and strong. In 2022-2023 fiscal year, income from the garment sector in Myanmar is $4.7 billion, which is more than the income before the coup. It is ridiculous. What happened to our workers? Before the coup, we have 700,000 workers in the garment sector. Now we have about 400,000 workers. 6% of $4.7 billion are salary for the workers of 450,000. Workers are getting $1.68 per day with forced labor. If you see the data, you will see that how the forced labor and wage exploitation is happening seriously. But how the governments in EU member countries allow the EU to do this kind of project in Myanmar. $3 million, you can support 450,000 workers for a year.
Yeah. Thank you.
So conclusion, I like to ask you to stop brands sourcing from Myanmar, and I request to the governments in Germany and the EU countries to stop what is EU doing in Myanmar. They are supporting the military financially, and also these brands in the EU also are responsible for all the killing in Myanmar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear them?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now. Yeah.
So Excellency Musharraf Hossain Bhuiya has spoken. I just want to say something about the gray zone. Not all trade unions create disruption, and not all garment manufacturers are evil. I think we need to all acknowledge that. There is good and evil in both of us. And I will say this to Nazma's face. Nazma, basically all the trade unions that she has worked with in the factories, all the factories feel safe because there is constructive engagement. But not all the trade unions in Bangladesh are like that. So I think, she speaks in rage. Most of the time that's her style because she's been hardened through, so many years of deprivation. And I think both the factory owners and the trade union, I think we both need counseling to reach a common ground. Otherwise, mutual grievances will be there. We will only be venting at each other and not achieving the goal. Madam Secretary, to your point about daycare centers, Najma is also partly true because many of our daycare centers, maybe not everybody has functioning daycare centers. So in those daycare centers, people don't want to go. But we are also tired of hearing so many accusations. So I would actually, if Jochen and Christina are in the room, I would like to formally propose to Connor if Better Work could actually pair up with RSC and run a survey in all of the RSC-covered factories on the social aspects, because we don't have the resources to do that. But at least 1,600 factories, you will have direct access, and you'll have data, whether we are doing good or not. Then it's going to be clear. I think that is one way to go forward. And Madam Secretary, to your point, I think Michael answered it already. There's open costing where labor is separately charged. So don't you worry. The brands know about every dime that is being spent. So with the minimum wage going up, they will know exactly how much compensation the industry owner would require. So they're absolutely there. Just a quick question to you, though, and I'm done. The survey that you talked about, this is the, hang on a second, the responsible purchasing practices one. Just one question. Have your suppliers endorsed it? Great. Thank you very much.
So it's super quick responses because we're over time here. So Connor, we're going to go reverse order, and we're going to end with Dr. Kofler. So Connor first.
Responding to Rabana, responding to
respond to whatever you want to, but you maybe be selective, right?
Okay. EPZ zones in Bangladesh are in violation of international labor standards, full stop. So we need to have a universal law in Bangladesh that applies to all workers, all managers, so that everyone is treated fairly and equally. So we, ILO Better Work, do not work in the EPZ zones, or the EPZs, for that very reason, because we are the ILO, and they're in violation of some of the international labor standards. Rabana's challenge question on running a survey, absolutely, let's have that conversation. What we try to do is try to, work out what progress is being made, what is not. As I said earlier, it's not always linear, but as long as we're very clear of what's going on, I think that's very important that we address that. I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor.
Michael.
Thank you very much. Michael?
Yeah, also not a lot to say. First of all, I'm very pleased to see Kansahi in the room because we had met a couple of times over video, but never in person. So glad to see you here in good shape. And I have to say that was also for us not a tough decision. It was a complicated decision to stop sourcing in Myanmar. We did this very early, as you know, and we tried our best together with yourself and with Christina to have a responsible exit in this country. I don't know if we succeeded completely to 100%, but I think we did our utmost in order to leave the country in a decent manner.
Nazma.
Okay, thank you. Actually, also I need to inform you that we are here, Industrial Global Union affiliate, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Tunisia. We are also coming here for this Europe for the lobby week. So yesterday we were in Geneva with the ILO and other stakeholders. Today this conference, after we'll go to the German Parliament, and then we are going to the Brussels, the European Parliament members, and also to Amsterdam. So we are also wants to be mandatory due diligence, not volunteer effort, because it's a failure. So we want the things, and also the things I wanted to say, because when in the COVID time, when I raised my voice in the street, in the media, in a blog, the garments owner house, because they are not paying, the situation was so bad. The BGME was in the press, in the Home Ministry also said, who are going to talk show in the media, who is blocking the owner house, who is demonstration in the road, they must be arrested. So it's happened to me, and now I'm asking this forum, we need justice. The Rana Plaza collapse is 10 years. What happened with those, the greedy supplier brand? They are not getting any penalty. They are not getting any punishable things. But if we raise our voice, why the manufacturer asking, we have to be in the prison? So we want the justice, because you are talking about the things. When we raise our things, we are blacklisted. We are in the prison. But when they murder and kill, so not a brand are in the any penalty get from neither Germany or Europe or America. Even my country, the government is not giving any punishment. Those are the supplier who kill the workers. They are in Europe, they are in different country, but our workers are pain and suffer, and still they couldn't get the proper treatment. So that kind of things has to be changed. So therefore, My Excellency, I told that lot of union in garment sector, thousands of union under the pocket of the manufacturer. Those are the union who are created by the manufacturer. They might be corrupted. They might be asking for demand. I'm in this sector last 35 years. I was working in the factory age of 11, and today I'm talking here. If I'm like that kind of union, I cannot raise my voice like this. So you have to respect. Corruption is everywhere. The Europe, America, the supplier, brand, government, everywhere. So we should not be blame ourselves. The corruption created by the company. They are creating greedy to us. And the women's are really problem. There is no sufficient daycare center, what I'm saying. And I'm requesting all of them to please come to Bangladesh, visit our union, how responsible we are on the disciplinary, on the productivity. So we are working for now we need to mandatory due diligence, and that is our urge to our Dr. Golfer and Secretary of State of BMZ, and also we will talk everyone, everybody has to be punishable, who is guilty, because the innocent workers should know, and fair price and fair wages is very important, because that is the capitalism, the cheap labor concept can disrespect. Even my country said the union are corrupted because we are the workers' representative. So the workers has no respect anywhere. So how we have get the justice? So please do the mandatory due diligence. Also, I'm asking to German government, the American company who are producing in this country, selling the goods in country, you have to push them to sign the accord. The Amazon is a big company. They are not signing. The Gap, Levi's, Walmart started killing workers from since 90 till now, but there is no penalty, no accountable, no responsible. So we want responsible business, we want a responsible union, and responsible government should be. Our legislation is a worker-friendly, no, it's a work-friendly. Talking about the green factory, I really love, we have a lot of positive initiative. Green factory doesn't mean only the environmental things, or it should be freedom of association, living ways, all aspects. If anyone show one factory has like that, so we respect all things. We are not against the business, but we need the systemic change. And people should be, when talk, has to be respect. Otherwise, it will not happen. Because why I'm fighting for the better ways or better thing? It's not my job. It's a manufacturer job. Why they cannot do the better negotiation? But we are fighting for that. But when we come as a Bangladeshi and treated like we are a corrupted people, very disrespect. I'm sorry, I never had this kind of word because I met a lot of people in this world. But please do the mandatory due diligence, volunteer effort, social audit, charity need to be stopped because enough. 10 years, we didn't get anything. Respect the workers' rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nazma. State Secretary, really any responses you have, but also your closing words. So if you're going to do it from here or the podium, or you're okay there?
Changing places. I just want a quick reaction what I've heard. So for me, a few things are important. Responsibility is needed for everybody. For governments, for entrepreneurs, and of course also for trade unions. I'm not arguing that there should be one part which is not responsible. Everybody is responsible that at the end of the day decent work is being implemented on the ground. But I just repeat, for me, collective bargaining is a chance, as an opportunity, like it was mentioned before for the accord, is an opportunity to come in a peaceful way to good results for all sides. And I think that should be the goal, that all sides are in a winning position then. And for me, collective bargaining is a good instrument on that. One sentence to the women, I have to say, honestly, having 60 or 80% of women in a branch is not always a sign for a big feminist movement, because it's normally the workplaces which are not paid well, and that's the reason why women are working there. Not because somebody thought, oh, we have to liberate the women. I have to really make that point. If I see 60% of the women in the leading positions, then I change my mind, but not before that. And a last word before the official closing remarks. I think transparency is crucial. Transparency is crucial. You were pointing that out with transparency, what part of the whole cost is for the workload and what is for other parts. That is crucial, transparency. It's crucial what brands are paying, but it's also crucial for what workers are receiving from the payment of the brands. So you have to have all sides included in that transparency. The brands who have to have a fair like you were pointing out, fair agreements with their suppliers, but then also the suppliers with fair agreements to the workers, and therefore you need collective bargaining. So that is my...
Whatever you prefer.
I'm jumping down. And all the stuff we get. Yeah, please. I have 2 hands, which I normally need for talking, so I'm sorry for that. Well, changing the role a little bit, from being on a panel, you're always also a little bit involved with your personal engagement and your opinion, but also then now in an official position in closing that session and closing that event. Once again, participants, dear participants, online and offline, ladies and gentlemen, everybody who's been here, excellencies from the embassies of Pakistan and Bangladesh, and of course participants on the panel, on the first panel. In behalf also of my Minister of Svenja Schulze, I'm very happy that you all have joined us for that event. For us, it's very important to come into that conversation to see what happened in the last 10 years. Also, I think that was also, and I want to mention that also pointed out, talking about achievements, because there have been achievements. We heard a lot of them. We heard about safety and security. We heard about what brands are engaged in doing and how their mindsets changed a lot. And I think that is very important. I also have seen improvements in my visit in Bangladesh. I have to say that frankly and clearly, and I will say that. But on the other hand, we are also here to see that those 10 years are a kind of landmark where we see where we have to go further. What we achieved and what we can achieve in the future together. And therefore, I'm very glad that you all are here and we all had the opportunity to discuss what should be done in the future to come up with really positive results for everybody involved in the textile sector. For us as German government, the textile sector is an example, but it's not the only sector we are talking about when they're talking about decent work. I have to say that, and I want to underline that, because if you talk about due diligence on the German and a European level, we are talking about due diligence in all branches. I want to underline that because always the textile sector is somehow blamed a little bit, and that's maybe also unfair. We have to talk about extractive industry, we have to talk about agriculture, we have to talk about finance. I know that's a big debate in the European level at the moment, but we have to talk about all those sectors. I want to underline that. And in most of the sectors, we face challenges. And one was mentioned, one challenge is the issue on gender inequality and what is actually that in a nutshell seen in a disparity in the supply chains and the possibilities of female workers. In textile sector, it was mentioned, most of the workers are female, at least those who are not earning a living wage. And I've seen that myself. I've been to many textile factories. I've been in India, I've been in Bangladesh, I've been also in Pakistan in a textile company, in good ones and in bad ones, let's put it that way. But what I experienced is that the female workers were always those, and if I asked them, they couldn't make a living on their wages. They couldn't make a living on that. It doesn't mean that men have maybe not also that problem, but it is definitely so that it is a special problem, the low wages for female workers. We have to talk about gender-based violence in a factory surrounding, in a factory setting. That is also a challenge, a big challenge. It's a challenge even going to the workplace and coming back from the workplace. That's one reason why night shifts are not done, which are better paid, not done by women, because it's too dangerous for them. So safety at workspace is a real important issue as if you want to fight gender inequality, and I think that was topic in our discussion today also. And it's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why my minister and my ministry and my government is insisting on strategies on feminist development policy. That starts in Germany, to be honest. It starts always with us. We are really not perfect. Equal pay is not something we invented here. We don't even have it. It starts with us, but it's something we want to discuss in any field of politics, internal politics, and in our cooperation with other partners around the world. So that's one big issue. I think we can go ahead in the future. The second issue we discussed on the panel, we discussed a lot, is the issue on living wages. I was pointing out that my ministry, our development ministry here in Germany, is supporting wherever it is possible also EU due diligence legislation which is taking into consideration the question of decent work and living wages. And we are welcoming very much, and we heard it just, the ACT Alliance, that there are first steps and there are ideas how to really implement at the end of on the ground better procedures and better wages. Another initiative, maybe you have a look if you're walking out then, which we are supporting is the industry we want. So talking about how it should look like that everybody can have his fair share, that entrepreneurs have the possibility to do good business, but workers also have the possibility to have a decent life. So and that combination is something we have to work on together. Collaboration, I think, was one of the words of the day today. So therefore we are supporting and we are heavily involved in a lot of challenges going on. We are supporting the agreements who are lifting up standards and who are at the end of the day trying to fulfill those standards. We heard about the accord to Pakistan extended. We also see it very positively that different stakeholders are addressing those challenges now in the Dindigul agreement in India. So there is plenty of countries who are involved really to come up with better ideas and also take action against gender violence. Again, that's also something which is very important on that. And as I was saying, we're welcoming very much the accord expanded to Pakistan, and I really want to underline also, it was said already, that for Bangladesh to join the RSC, that's in English, it's so difficult, believe me, RSC, is a very positive step forward, and as it was mentioned, it's something which is taking then bringing the ownership to the country, and that is, I fully agree to that statement, is something which is at the end of the day what my ministry wants, to have the ownership and the responsibility to the countries where it belongs to. We want to be partners on that way. I want to underline that. On that way, we want to be partners and we want to support those initiatives. Well, that all is showing that a lot is happening, and I don't want to stand long in between fruitful conversations or maybe some lunch break or whatever is planned by GIZ. I once again want to thank you that I see motivated stakeholders from all different parts of the world, but also from different branches and different parts of responsibility. Once again, thank you for being here, for joining us, and hopefully we can intensify our work on those important topics in the next decade. So in 10 years when we are sitting here, we're having those conditions Nazma was asking for. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you, State Secretary. You know where the lunch is. You know that the information booths, those initiatives the State Secretary mentioned, are all waiting to talk to you next door. I think that's everything, other than to say thank you again to the panel and the State Secretary and to everybody who joined us online as well today. Thank you.
See you in, well, I don't know.
When are you next in London?